Through the ages, Britain's architectural landscape has changed time and time again. Nowhere has this been more true than the town of Colchester in Essex. Colchester has had many hosts, from Iron Age settlers, Roman occupiers, to Norman rule. Indeed, this historic town has been an important destination for over 2,000 years, with roots tracing back even further. One of the most awe-inspiring artefacts found around Colchester was the Sheepen cauldron found in a pit on the hilly fields at Sheepen. The Sheepen cauldron is the earliest known bronze cauldron from Britain, and one of the best preserved. It is the first known example of sheet metal being used to create a functioning object rather than just a decorative object, which shows a milestone in technology. Recording Iron Age settlements is particularly difficult due to the lack of surviving foundations. As Iron Age buildings were primarily made of wood, which would usually entirely rot after less than a century after construction, other than visible earthworks, or earthworks found using LiDAR scans, one of the only ways to discover Iron Age settlements is from the post holes left in the ground, and a high concentration of in-period artefacts, specifically domestic artefacts, which would suggest semi-permanent settlement took place. Another factor which makes Iron Age settlements particularly difficult to track is the general lack of written record from the period, due to Iron Age Britain still having more of an oral tradition culture as opposed to the ever-growing written tradition culture which was growing across mainland Europe, primarily thanks to the expansion of the Roman Empire. Roundhouses were the first structures in Colchester, made from timber and thatch using wooden framework packed with clay for the walls, a technique known as wattle and daub. Roundhouses were typically large, one-room structures featuring a central hearth and a boundary fence to hold livestock. There are no known considerable settlements during the Iron Age in Essex. The largest was at St Osyth, with up to 14 houses. Contrary to popular belief, people of the Iron Age felt a similar way to personal appearance as we do in the modern age. An attention to appearing upper class was paramount, and the use of fancy brooches, patterned clothing, and decorative ornaments were highly sought after by households all across Iron Age Britain. This was true of the Iron Age settlers at Colchester, as many spectacular finds have been uncovered locally, many being attributed to the reign of Cunobelin, who was a king of the Trinovanti tribe, and had established his capital here, which was named Camulodunon, which is a Brythonic name meaning the fortress of Camulos, Camulos being the name of a war god in the Trinovantes' local religion. Camulodunon was founded in around 50 BC and was ruled by Cunobelin directly, who used the settlement as a mint for printing coins out of gold, silver, and bronze. Indeed, abbreviated versions of Camulodunon printed on coins have been found all over England, proving Cunobelin to be, possibly, the most distinguished and powerful ruler of Iron Age Britain. During this time, Britain began expanding its trade throughout mainland Europe, made somewhat easier with the albeit forceful convergence of European tribes due to the ever-expanding occupying rule of the Roman Empire. Common imports included wine, fish sauce, olive oil, silver, glass, and pottery, and popular exports consisted of slaves, cattle, corn, hunting dogs, iron, and gold. This newfound trading opportunity changed the way the native Britannic elite viewed the world, and gradually they became increasingly influenced by this new Mediterranean culture encroaching upon them. After the first initial clashes of hostilities during the beginning of the Roman invasion of Britain in 43 AD, the majority of southeast Britain bowed to Roman rule, largely due to Roman diplomats working with the local elite, rewarding cooperation with status and wealth. Not long after the Roman conquest of Britain, the military chose the area of Camalodunum to be the site of the first legionary fortress in Britain, and as the Roman frontier pushed northwards and westwards, Camalodunum became a Roman colony. Camalodunum, the Latinized version of the original Brythonic name, became the town's new title, and as such became the de facto capital of Roman Britain. Despite the cooperation of the local leaders, the majority of the people in Camalodunum were forced to work on building the new Roman town, most importantly, the construction of the Great Temple of Claudius, which was the largest classical-style temple in Britain. The Temple of Claudius was, by far, the most elaborate of at least 7 other Romano-British temples in Camalodunum. Unfortunately, this labour, coupled with the ever-overbearing force-feeding of Roman culture, caused a huge resentment between the local Trinovantes and their foreign occupiers. Also fueling the fire of anguish between the two cultures was the ongoing feud between Boudica, the widow queen of the Iceni, and the Roman occupiers north of Camalodunum. Boudica was the wife of Prasutagus, who was king of the Iceni tribe, who lived in what is now known as East Anglia. Prasutagus bartered a deal with the Romans, agreeing that after he passes away, both Boudica and the Romans will have equal rule over his land and his people, a deal that was broken by the Romans immediately after his death, due to Roman tradition refusing to recognize female authority, especially when not of Roman descent. Refusal to back down to Roman rule led to severe mistreatment of Boudica and her family by the Romans, with tales of rape and abuse whispering through the tribal hill forts around Britain, lending a sympathetic ear to Boudica's call for revenge. This bubbling resentment inevitably spilled over into bitter open rebellion in 60 AD, when the scorned Iceni queen mustered a huge army against the Romans. The Britannic army swiftly laid siege to Camalodunum, which quickly fell to the barbarians due to being severely under-garrisoned and under-defended at the time, with no notable town walls. The Britons charged through the streets, butchering every person in sight and torching every building by the order of Boudica, who demanded the city to be burned to the ground. The surviving townfolk ran for cover in the lavish temple of Claudius, subsequently becoming trapped inside as the Britons swept into the temple grounds, continuing to surround the temple for 2 days. A relief army consisting of the Legio IX Hispana marched into Camalodunum, which by now was belching smoke and ash high into the air, and could be seen for miles around as it burned asunder. It is unlikely that the entire legion was sent, as detachments of the legion had been posted across a network of forts across Britain. The relief force was most likely consisting of approximately half the legion, around 2,500 men. Britannic scouts reported the Roman army drawing closer, and a large portion of Boudica's horde pulled out of the city to meet them head-on, led by the Iceni. The Britannic horde, fueled by their unity of hatred for those foreign occupiers, obliterated the Roman legion, with the Roman historian Tacitus reporting possibly 80% of the Roman foot soldiers being slaughtered. The Battle of Camalodunum is more commonly known as the Massacre of the Ninth Legion. Returning from the battle, Boudica decided she had had enough. The order for torching the temple was given, and so the Iceni-led horde set the Grand Temple on fire, with the surviving Roman citizens barricaded inside. Those who attempted to escape were swiftly caught and massacred. The sacking of Camalodunum sent a shockwave throughout the Roman Empire. The word soon reached Rome, and the Emperor Nero felt so panicked from the stern defiance of Roman rule in Britain that he considered pulling his forces out of Britain entirely, deeming the Britannic people untamable. However, the Roman war machine refused to accept defeat, and, in either 60 or 61 AD, the Roman army fought the Britannic horde at the Battle of Watling Street, which, with a Roman victory, proved to be the final battle and end of the rebellion. Camulodunum was later rebuilt, including the Temple of Claudius, along with new buildings such as a theatre, a circus, which was a racetrack for chariots, and a circuit of large walls, complete with towers and gatehouses to defend the city against future attacks. The city was given a new official name of Colonia Vitracensis. However, the capital had been moved southwest to Londinium, now modern-day London, where the capital remains today. Despite no longer being the capital of Roman Britain, Colonia Vitracensis remained as the main religious centre, and the new stone walls ensured the city's safety until the end of the Roman period. One of the most intriguing remnants left from the days of Roman rule are the expertly crafted mosaics, the most exceptional example being the Middleborough mosaic, discovered just outside the Roman walls. By 410 AD, as fractures spread throughout the Roman Empire, and the Western Empire fell, the Romano-British found themselves cut off from the war machine in mainland Europe as it marched back home, in an attempt to extinguish the constant uprisings and invasions that were forcing the empire to buckle. Soon after, greedy eyes were laid upon the coasts of Britain. Boats began to sail from Germania and Scandinavia, as raiders set their sights on the defenceless Romano-British towns, knowing no help would come from Rome. This was not an organised conquest of Britain, but was first an opportunity to plunder and later migrate and settle in the country. Remains of distinctive round houses began to crop up in excavations within the town walls of Camulodunum, these being the homes of choice for the pagan raiders, who disagreed with the Roman way of life, deep-rooted within their psyche due to centuries of forced Roman occupation of their homelands. These pagan settlers, known mainly as Saxons, began to take over the rest of England, and, despite London still being the capital, Camulodunum became an important town for the Kingdom of the East Saxons, or, as we'd say today, the Kingdom of Essex. Over time, the Saxons migrated further into England. Camulodunum again saw a gradual lowering of its population, and much of the town fell into disrepair. By the 10th century, the town was recorded as Colchester. However, accounts of an important Saxon town with matching geography were written long before this date. A few hundred years after the Saxons had assumed control of England, Viking raiders began attacking seaside villages, towns, and religious centres across the east of England in the late 8th and 9th centuries. Colchester was used as a base for the invading Viking armies, the surviving Roman walls providing much needed safety against immediate Saxon attack. In 917 AD, the Saxon king, Edward the Elder, managed to beat the Vikings out of Colchester and refortified the town against future attacks, slowly getting it to function again as an important Saxon town. Although barely any architecture in modern-day Colchester survives from the Saxon period, foundations of a Saxon chapel can be seen at the foot of Colchester Castle. Fragments of painted wall plaster found within the foundations offer hints that the chapel may have been richly decorated. However, it is unclear whether these decorations were Saxon or later Norman. 1066 brought more change to the landscape of Britain, with the arrival of the Normans from Normandy, now northern France, arriving on the beaches of Pevensey, East Sussex. Victors of the famous Battle of Hastings on the 14th of October 1066, the Normans began overwhelming the Saxon people all across England. who were already locked in warfare with the Vikings from the north. Visiting the many historic sites around Colchester, you'll notice the abundance of red brick used within the building constructions, most notably the castle and the priory. This is Roman brick and tile, taken from older buildings and town walls, being recycled over and over again throughout the centuries. After the Normans successfully took hold of the country, Colchester re-established its position as one of the most important towns in England once again, mostly due to its thriving cloth and weaving industry. The town received its first royal charter in 1189, and it was partly thanks to this that some grand buildings were constructed, such as Colchester Castle, St Botolph's Priory, and St John's Abbey. A charter issued by King Henry V in 1413 featured references to Colchester's Roman past and shows that the townspeople were proud of the town's long history and heritage. Some other notable construction projects included the rebuilding of the town centre and the Dutch Quarter. William the Conqueror gave the town to Udo the Steward as protector, and as such, Udo began work on Colchester Castle in the late 1060s. The castle was built on top of the old Roman temple foundations. The room where the foundations lay were then used as a prison in around 1226 AD for those accused of heresy and witchcraft. The prison was later expanded, with doors built to give independent access to the castle. The prison was continuously used for over 600 years. During the 1080s, construction of the castle was temporarily stopped, and battlements were built on top of the walls for defence, before later being built higher. The walls on the ground floor are over 3.7 metres thick, which are some of the thickest castle walls in England. The castle was built from a mixture of Roman brick, tile, flint, mortar and limestone imported from Caen in Normandy, a type of stone which was commonly used by the Normans for many castles and cathedrals, notably Norwich Castle and Norwich Cathedral. By the time of its completion in 1120, Colchester Castle was, and indeed still is, the largest Norman keep in Britain, and has been in continuous use for over 900 years as a royal palace, prison, garden feature, air raid shelter, and now museum. St Botolph's Priory was built in around 1100 AD, with the ruined church still standing today. However, the original complex is thought to be much bigger, with many monastic buildings. It was the first Augustinian priory in England, and the walls which you see today are from the middle of the 12th century. The priory was closed in 1536 during the dissolution of the monasteries. However, the church remained still in use until the English Civil War in the 1640s, where, like the other churches in Colchester, it was used by the Royalists as a defensive building, using the tower to fire upon the parliamentarian forces. This forced the parliamentarians to demolish many of the church towers in the town, hence why you see many churches with medieval flint walls, yet more modern brick towers. During the summer of 1648, the parliamentarian army attempted to storm the Royalist-held town, yet failed to take it. So they besieged Colchester for 11 weeks until the Royalists finally surrendered. Two of the Royalist commanders, Sir Charles Lucas and Sir George Lisle, were executed by firing squad outside the castle. A memorial stone marks the spot by the north wall of the castle. The Benedictine Abbey of St John was founded in 1095 AD, near where the old Roman circus used to stand. However, the only remaining building is the Abbey Gatehouse, which was built in around 1400 AD to strengthen the Abbey's defences following the recent violence of the Peasants' Revolt. This gatehouse is unique for Colchester, as it uses flint blocks to create patterns, a decoration method known as East Anglian flushwork. During the High Medieval period, East Anglia was known as a very wealthy religious centre of England, so mimicking its classic decorative designs in Colchester would have meant that St John's Abbey must have been a very rich and important building for its time. After the dissolution of the monasteries by King Henry VIII, a royalist family mansion was built on the Abbey grounds, and during the Siege of Colchester in 1648, the mansion was attacked by the parliamentarian forces. You can still see where part of the stone vaulting within the gatehouse was destroyed from cannon fire.